know how I stayed alive this long, all these years. Fear. The spectacle of fearsome acts.
To defeat my enemy, I extinguish his life and consume him as I consume these flames.
William Poole entered the world on July 24th, 1821, at a time when America was still defining what it meant to be American. His parents were English immigrants, part of an earlier wave that had arrived before the great floods of Irish immigration. That distinction mattered deeply later in Poole's life. His father worked as a butcher, a trade that required physical strength, stamina, and a tolerance for blood and death. This was not a profession for the delicate or the thoughtful. It was manual, repetitive, and unforgiving. Young William grew up in and around butcher stalls and markets. He saw animals slaughtered not as an event, but as routine. Violence to him was not shocking. It was practical. This early exposure shaped his worldview. Death was normal. Pain was temporary strength, determined survival. Unlike middle-class children who were taught restraint and manners, Poole was taught usefulness. If you could work, fight, and endure, you mattered. If you couldn't, you didn't. The Five Points neighborhood was widely regarded as the most dangerous urban district in America. Overcrowded tenements housed thousands in squalor. Disease spread quickly. Alcohol was cheap. Violence was constant. For boys like Poole, childhood ended early. Street fights were common. Theft was survival. Gangs were protection. The absence of effective policing meant disputes were settled immediately and violently. Weakness invited attack. Poole learned early that reputation mattered more than law. If people feared you, they left you alone. If they didn't, they tested you. He made sure they didn't. Bare-knuckle boxing was more than sport. It was a proving ground. Fighters weren't just entertainers. They were symbols of strength, masculinity, and dominance. Poole fought without hesitation and without mercy. He did not follow unwritten rules of honor. If an opponent blinked, Poole exploited it. Eye-gouging, biting, and crippling blows were not accidents. They were strategy. Importantly, Poole never apologized for this behavior. To him, fairness was a luxury for men who couldn't win otherwise. This mindset solidified his reputation. People didn't just fear losing to Poole. They feared what would happen if they did. Poole's life followed a pattern familiar to many working-class men of the era, but with sharper edges. His days revolved around work in butcher shops, taverns and saloons, firehouses tied to the Bowery Boys, boxing rooms and training halls. Taverns weren't leisure spaces, they were command centers. Deals were made, rivalries ignited, politics were discussed violently. Poole drank heavily, but rarely lost control. Witnesses often described him as calm even when surrounded by chaos. This control made him dangerous. He didn't explode, he calculated. The Bowery Boys were not simply criminals. They were part gang, part political machine, part cultural identity. Many were volunteer firefighters, a role that carried respect and influence. Fire companies often fought each other as fiercely as they fought fires. Poole thrived in this world. He wasn't the loudest leader, but he was the final authority. When violence escalated beyond shouting, Poole stepped in. His loyalty to the Bowery Boys was absolute. Betrayal was unforgivable. This strict code made him trusted and feared. Poole's nativism was not abstract hatred. It was rooted in fear. Irish immigrants arrived in massive numbers, willing to work for less pay and live in worse conditions. Jobs disappeared, neighborhoods changed. To Poole, this felt like invasion. The Know-Nothing Party gave him language for feelings he already held. It reframed violence as patriotism. Poole believed America belonged to the strong. Strength meant entitlement. Entitlement justified force. This belief system allowed him to see himself not as a criminal, but as a defender. John Morrissey was Poole's opposite in origin. Irish, Catholic, immigrant. But in every other way, they were mirrors. Both were boxers. Both were political enforcers. Both believed power came from violence. Their feud was inevitable. Morrissey represented the future Poole feared. Immigrant power rising through the same brutal methods Poole used himself. This made their rivalry personal, symbolic, and unavoidable. By 1855, Poole knew his life was in danger. Threats were constant. Enemies were numerous. But Poole refused to retreat. To hide would mean weakness. To change his habits would mean surrender. He continued to frequent taverns openly, surrounded by allies but fully aware death could come at any moment. When he entered Stanwix Hall, he knew what could happen. He went anyway. After being shot, Poole refused surgery. This decision has often been dismissed as foolish, but it was ideological. Allowing another man to cut into his body, even a doctor, violated his sense of dominance. If he was going to die, it would be on his terms. Whether he truly said, "I die a true American," matters less than the fact that people believed he would. It fit the man. Poole's funeral drew massive crowds. Politicians marched beside gang members. Supporters treated him as a martyr. Enemies stayed silent, but watched. Even in death, Poole commanded attention. Over time, the man became legend. Hollywood would later exaggerate him, but the truth was already dramatic enough. William Poole was not a legend born on a movie screen. He was a real man in a real city at a time when violence decided who mattered and who didn't. He lived by strength, ruled through fear, and believed history would remember him as a patriot. But history doesn't choose sides. It only records what remains. Today, Bill the Butcher rests here, silent, surrounded by thousands of others who once believed their names would last forever. Power fades, violence ends, and even the most feared men are eventually reduced to stone and soil. What survives are the stories. If you believe these forgotten lives deserve to be remembered, studied, and never buried, this is Tales from the Tombs, NJ. Because some stories refuse to stay buried. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel.